Have you ever considered how much of your life may have been spent waiting for someone else to give you permission to feel whole, waiting for someone to understand you, waiting for someone to apologize, waiting for someone to choose you, reassure you, come back to you, believe in you, or finally recognize the value you have been hoping they would see? Sometimes the waiting is obvious. At other times it hides inside anxiety, overthinking, people-pleasing, loneliness, resentment, or the quiet belief that your life cannot fully begin until something outside of you changes. Maybe there is a person you are still hoping will become different, a partner who will finally listen, a parent who will one day acknowledge what you needed and never received, a friend who will understand why you were hurt, someone from your past who will return with the words you have imagined hearing 100 times. Or maybe there is no single person at all. Maybe you are waiting for life itself to reassure you that you are safe, worthy, loved, and exactly where you are supposed to be. There is nothing wrong with wanting love. There is nothing wrong with companionship, support, affection, understanding, or human connection. We were not created to become emotionally isolated from one another. Love shared between people can be one of the most beautiful experiences of being alive. But there is an important difference between allowing another person to share your peace and making that person responsible for creating your peace. One is love. The other slowly becomes dependence. Dependence does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it simply sounds like this. When they answer me, I will relax. When they choose me, I will feel worthy. When they finally understand, I can let go. When someone believes in me, then I will believe in myself. When the right person arrives, I will stop feeling incomplete. The ego repeats these promises so quietly and so often that they begin to feel like facts. Yet there is a deeper question waiting underneath all of them. What if the peace you have been asking another person to give you was never meant to come from another person? What if you were not really waiting for someone? What if you were waiting for a feeling? You wanted to feel safe. You wanted to feel seen. You wanted to feel chosen. You wanted to feel worthy. You wanted to feel loved. And somewhere along the way, another human being became the symbol of that feeling. This realization does not make your longing foolish. It makes it understandable, but it also gives you your power back. Because if one particular person is the only doorway to your peace, then your peace belongs to something you cannot control. You cannot control whether someone responds to you. You cannot control whether they understand your intentions, grow emotionally, apologize, remain close, change their mind, or see you as clearly as you wish to be seen. You can communicate honestly. You can love. You can listen. You can create boundaries. You can choose compassion. But you cannot live another person's consciousness for them. And when your inner state becomes dependent on their consciousness, suffering begins. You send a message and immediately begin watching the phone. You enter a room and scan every face for approval. You make a decision and then search the reactions of other people before deciding whether you feel good about it. Someone becomes distant, and the mind begins building explanations before you even know what is true. Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? Should I say something? Should I wait? What does this mean about me? One thought becomes 10, 10 become 50. Soon you are no longer experiencing what actually happened. You are experiencing an entire world the mind has created around what happened. And this is where awareness becomes the beginning of freedom. Not by fighting your thoughts, not by becoming ashamed that you have insecure feelings, not by forcing yourself to be strong, simply by seeing what is happening. You notice, I am asking something outside of me to decide whether I am allowed to feel peaceful. That moment of noticing matters more than you may realize. The part of you that notices fear is not the fear. The awareness that sees loneliness is larger than the loneliness. The awareness that recognizes the need for approval is already deeper than the need itself. Imagine the sky during a storm. Clouds may cover everything you can see. Thunder may shake the air. Rain may fall so heavily that it feels as if the whole world has disappeared into darkness. Yet the sky itself has not vanished. The storm is occurring within the sky, but the sky is larger than the storm. Your awareness is like that. Fear may move through you. Grief may move through you. Rejection may move through you. Uncertainty may move through you, but something deeper remains capable of witnessing all of it. The spiritual journey begins when you stop identifying entirely with the weather and begin remembering the sky. This is what the ego fears, because the ego survives through identification. It says, I am my rejection, I am my past, I am what that person thinks of me, I am what happened yesterday, I am my fear about tomorrow. The deeper self says something very different. It says these experiences are moving through me, but they are not the totality of what I am. There is a presence within you that existed before anyone approved of you and that remains even after someone rejects you. There is an awareness that was present before you. Learn to perform for love, compare yourself, please everyone, prove your value, or adjust yourself to fit the expectations of the world. You may call that presence spirit. You may call it your higher self. You may call it God. You may call it source. The label is less important than the experience of becoming still enough to recognize it. You have probably touched this place many times without giving it a name. Maybe you felt it very early in the morning when the world had not become noisy yet. Maybe you stood beside the ocean and suddenly realized that the worries occupying your mind were not as permanent as they appeared. Maybe you walked through trees, watched the sunset, held a sleeping child, listened to rain, or sat quietly for a moment and experienced peace, even though nothing in your external life had been solved. Those moments contain an important teaching. Peace is not always the reward you receive after life finally cooperates with you. Sometimes peace is what appears when you stop demanding that this moment become another moment before you are willing to live it. The mind says, solve everything first, then rest. Get the answer first. Know where the relationship is going. Know whether the future will work. Know who is staying. Know whether the decision is correct. Know whether people approve. Then, perhaps, you may relax. But life rarely gives permanent guarantees. Relationships change. Bodies change. Plans change. People change their minds. Doors close. Unexpected doors open. Seasons begin and end without asking whether you feel ready. If peace requires certainty, peace will always remain somewhere in the future. This is one of the ego's most exhausting illusions, the belief that enough control will eventually produce enough safety. But control usually produces more things to control. You receive the reply you wanted and feel better for 10 minutes. Then the mind analyzes the tone of the message. Someone reassures you that they love you, and shortly afterward another fear appears. You make one decision and immediately wonder whether another choice might have been better. The ego never reaches the end of this search because its entire structure begins with the assumption that something is missing. Something must happen before I can be whole. Someone must behave differently before I can be peaceful. Something must be achieved before I can accept myself. When you begin seeing this pattern clearly, an entirely different possibility appears. Maybe you have not failed because you could not control life perfectly. Maybe control was never where peace was hidden. Think of a river. A river remains alive because it moves. It bends, changes direction, becomes narrow, becomes wide, meets rocks, moves around them, and continues towards something larger. If you demanded that one section of water remain exactly where it was forever, you would no longer have a living river. Much of our emotional suffering comes from wanting life to remain alive while asking it not to move. We want love, but we do not want vulnerability. We want closeness, but we do not want the possibility of loss. We want growth without change. We want freedom with guarantees. We want a living relationship, but sometimes ask another human being to remain exactly as they were when we first felt safe. There is nothing shameful in this. It is the human desire to avoid pain. But there is another kind of safety available to you. Not the safety of knowing exactly what will happen, the safety of knowing that whatever happens, you know where to return. You return inward. You return to awareness. You return to the source that was never dependent on the changing circumstances around you. This does not mean you stop caring what happens. Spiritual awareness is not emotional numbness. You still love, you still grieve, you still hope. You still feel disappointment when someone you trusted lets you down. But something changes in your relationship with those experiences. You stop allowing every event to become a definition of who you are. Someone leaves, and instead of turning their departure into proof that you are unlovable, you allow it to be what it is, an ending that hurts. Someone criticizes you, and instead of immediately allowing their opinion to become your identity, you ask whether there is anything useful to learn and then release the rest. Someone misunderstands you, and instead of exhausting yourself trying to live correctly inside their mind, you remember that you cannot manage every version of yourself that exists in other people's perceptions. There is tremendous freedom in allowing someone to misunderstand you without abandoning your own truth. The ego does not like this freedom. The ego wants everyone to understand, everyone to approve, everyone to agree, everyone to recognize how good your intentions were. But this is an impossible assignment. You can be kind and still be misunderstood. You can speak truthfully and someone may still interpret you through their own fear. You can give your best and still be criticized. You can love sincerely and still experience rejection. So the question eventually has to change. Instead of asking, does everyone approve of the way I am living? You begin asking, am I living in alignment with what feels loving, honest, peaceful, and true? This is the movement from external authority to inner alignment. It does not mean believing that you are always right. The ego can misuse spiritual language just as easily as it misuses anything else. Inner guidance is not an excuse to avoid accountability. The deeper question is not, how can I prove I am right? It is, what would love do here? Sometimes love apologizes. Sometimes love listens. Sometimes love speaks clearly. Sometimes love walks away. Sometimes love remains. Sometimes love says no. Sometimes love forgives but does not reopen the same door. Love is not weakness. Love is alignment with that part of you that no longer needs fear to make every decision. Many people were taught very early to confuse fear with love. Maybe you learned that being agreeable kept the peace. Maybe you became highly sensitive to the moods of everyone around you because knowing what other people needed helped you feel safe. Maybe you discovered that approval brought affection, so you became very good at being what others wanted. You learned to say yes when your heart meant no. You learned to stay silent when something felt wrong. You learned to minimize your needs so that no one would call you difficult. You became helpful, dependable, easy to love, easy to rely on. And people may even have praised you for it. But one day you may discover that everyone seems to know the version of you they need while you can barely hear your own voice. This is one of the hidden costs of people-pleasing. It appears to preserve connection, yet over time, it can disconnect you from yourself. Then loneliness begins to make more sense. There are times when you can be surrounded by people and still feel deeply lonely because loneliness is not always the absence of companionship. Sometimes loneliness is the absence of yourself. You have been gone from your own life for so long that you no longer know what it feels like to be at home within it. This is why the statement, "no one is coming to save you," can initially sound frightening. The frightened mind hears abandonment, but the deeper self hears liberation. It does not mean no one will help you. It does not mean you must do everything alone. It does not mean support is weakness. You may need a friend, you may need a teacher, you may need therapy, guidance, companionship, or practical help. Receiving support is part of being human, but support and rescue are not the same. Healthy support says, I will walk beside you while you remember your own strength. Dependency says, without this person, I have no strength. One expands you, the other eventually makes you afraid. The goal is not to become independent of love. The goal is to stop making another human being the source from which your worth must continuously be supplied. When you begin doing this, relationships change. You can love without constantly asking, will you leave me? You can care without controlling. You can give without secretly keeping score. You can receive affection without believing that losing it would mean losing yourself. You can allow another person to have their own emotions without making every change in their mood a crisis inside you. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It is love without possession. It is closeness without self-abandonment. And it becomes possible only when you begin remembering who you are beneath the ego's story of incompleteness. The ego believes love is something you obtain. The deeper self recognizes love as something you participate in. You do not have to chase what you are willing to become. If you want kindness, become more available to kindness. If you want peace, stop feeding every internal argument. If you want compassion, include yourself in your compassion. If you want love, become less interested in proving who deserves it and more interested in allowing love to move through the way you live. This does not mean accepting mistreatment. One of the great confusions around spirituality is the belief that loving everyone means remaining available to everyone. It does not. You can forgive someone and still know that the relationship is no longer healthy. You can wish someone peace from a distance. You can release resentment without inviting the same behavior back into your life. Forgiveness is not permission. Forgiveness is freedom. There may be someone you are still carrying inside your mind. Maybe they have not been part of your daily life for months or even years, but the conversation continues internally. You imagine what you should have said. You rehearse the explanation you never received. You picture the day they finally understand what they did. The external relationship may be over, yet internally you remain waiting, waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for the apology, waiting for them to become conscious enough to give you closure. And this is a very painful form of dependence because the person who wounded you continues to determine whether you are allowed to heal. At some point, forgiveness asks you to end that arrangement, not because what happened did not matter. It may have mattered deeply, not because the behavior was acceptable. It may not have been, not because you have suddenly forgotten, you may never forget. Forgiveness simply says, I am no longer willing to make your awakening a requirement for my freedom. Think of holding a stone tightly in your hand. At first, you believe you must hold it because the stone represents what happened. Letting go feels like saying the event was unimportant, so you continue gripping it. After enough time, your hand begins to hurt. The stone has not changed. The past has not changed. The person may not have changed. Only you are becoming exhausted. Forgiveness is opening your hand. The stone can continue to exist without requiring you to carry it everywhere. This is what it means to stop waiting for the person who hurt you to become the person who heals you. Healing is no longer placed in their hands. You bring it back into awareness. And sometimes, as awareness deepens, you are able to see another person more clearly. People often give from the level of consciousness available to them. Someone who has never learned emotional safety may create emotional chaos. Someone filled with unresolved fear may spread fear. Someone who carries deep self-rejection may struggle to offer mature love. This understanding does not excuse harmful actions. It simply prevents another person's limitations from becoming a statement about your value. Their inability to love you well was never reliable evidence that you were difficult to love. This is especially important when you begin forgiving yourself, because sometimes the person you most want to be rescued from is who you used to be. You remember the years you stayed too long, the warnings you ignored, the relationship you chased, the opportunity you did not take, the person you hurt, the time you believe you wasted, and the mind says, you should have known better. But look more compassionately at the person you were. That person did not have your present awareness. That person was operating with the fears, conditioning, beliefs, needs, and understanding available at that time. If you had known then what you know now, you may have chosen differently. But you did not know. This does not erase responsibility. It makes transformation possible. Shame rarely creates deep healing. You cannot hate yourself into becoming loving. You cannot punish yesterday until yesterday changes. You cannot repeatedly condemn the old version of yourself and call it growth. Growth means learning so deeply from what happened that you no longer need to become the same unconscious person again. Regret then becomes wisdom. Instead of asking, how could I have been so foolish? You ask, what did this experience teach me about fear, boundaries, honesty, love, and who I wish to become? One question imprisons you in the past. The other allows the past to participate in your awakening. When forgiveness creates space, surrender begins. The ego usually misunderstands surrender because it hears the word and imagines defeat. But spiritual surrender is not giving up on your life. It is giving up your argument with reality. A relationship ends and pain is natural. But then the mind adds, this should not have happened. A plan collapses and disappointment is natural. Then the mind adds, my life was not supposed to go this way. Someone behaves differently from what you hoped and hurt is natural. Then the mind adds, they must change before I can move forward. The event creates one layer of pain. Resistance creates another. Surrender gently releases the second layer. It says, this is what is here now. What is the most conscious response available to me? There is enormous power in that question because it returns you to the only place where your life actually exists. Now, yesterday can be remembered now, but it cannot be lived now. Tomorrow can be imagined now, but it cannot be controlled now. Life keeps returning you to this moment. And this is where intention becomes so important. Intention is often misunderstood as a way of forcing the universe to deliver a particular form. But intention, at its deepest level, is not about controlling form. It is about choosing the quality of energy and consciousness you bring to whatever form appears. Before a difficult conversation, Your intention may be to remain honest without becoming cruel. Before entering a room where you normally seek approval, your intention may be to remain connected with yourself. During uncertainty, your intention may be trust. During conflict, it may be compassion. During grief, it may simply be willingness. Intention becomes your inner compass. The weather can change without changing the compass. Other people can choose differently from what you hoped. The road can curve. A door can close. But you still get to decide whether fear, resentment, love, honesty, peace, or awareness is leading your next step. This is what it means to become responsible for your inner life. Responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything that happened to you. You may not have chosen the wound. You may not have created the abandonment. You may not be responsible for another person's betrayal, cruelty, dishonesty, or unconsciousness. But there is a form of responsibility that is deeply empowering. You can become responsible for what you continue carrying. You can become responsible for whether old fear continues making every new decision. You can become responsible for whether someone who hurt you 10 years ago continues living rent-free in your emotional world today. Responsibility is not punishment. It is the recognition that you still have the ability to respond. And once you recognize that ability, your life becomes much larger than what happened to you. You begin to understand that spiritual freedom does not require perfect circumstances. If freedom depended on the whole world changing first, you would never be free. Freedom begins when consciousness changes its relationship to the world. This is why solitude can become such an important teacher. At first, being alone may frighten you because you have been taught to interpret absence as rejection. But there is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness says something important is missing. Sacred solitude says something important can finally be heard. When there is no one else in the room telling you who you are, you begin to encounter yourself. You may sit quietly with tea, walk without calling anyone, listen to the sound of rain, watch afternoon light move across the wall. You begin to notice that silence is not empty. There is presence in it. There is life in it. There is an intelligence beneath all the noise. You are not merely the social role you perform. You are not only somebody's partner, parent, child, friend, employee, helper, or problem solver. Before all of those identities, you are awareness itself, experiencing life. And awareness does not need applause to exist. The tree does not ask the forest whether it deserves to grow. The rose does not apologize because the oak is taller. The moon does not feel inadequate because it cannot shine like the sun. Nature expresses without comparison. Human beings, however, learn to turn life into a race. Someone gets married before you. Someone succeeds sooner. Someone appears more confident. Someone's life looks more organized. The ego immediately concludes that you are behind. Behind whom? Behind what? What universal schedule are you supposed to be following? A soul does not arrive here with a stopwatch measuring itself against every other soul. Your life has its own rhythm. There may be seasons of expansion and seasons of quietness, seasons of companionship and seasons of solitude, seasons when everything seems clear and seasons when you are being asked to walk without knowing exactly where the path is leading. The ego interprets uncertainty as failure. The deeper self may recognize it as unfolding. Think of a seed beneath the soil. For a long time, nothing is visible. If you judge the seed only by what could be seen above the ground, you might assume nothing was happening. But invisible transformation can be taking place long before the first green shoot appears. There may be seasons in your life that look empty from the outside, while something essential is being reorganized within you. This is why patience becomes spiritual, not passive waiting. Trusting, waiting, you prepare the soil, you plant, you water, you offer light, but you do not dig the seed up every morning to demand evidence that it is growing. There comes a point where action must become trust. You have the conversation. You make the choice. You set the boundary. You tell the truth. You do what you can with love and awareness. Then you allow life to respond. The ego says constant interference equals safety. Trust says, I have done what I can. I am willing to allow what I cannot yet see. That willingness brings you closer to the source, because source cannot be fully experienced through control. It is experienced through relationship, through listening, through stillness, through the recognition that life is moving through you at the same time you are moving through life. Think again of the ocean. A wave rises from the ocean, takes a temporary form, travels, and eventually dissolves back into the same vastness from which it came. For a few moments, the wave appears to be separate, but it never stops being water. Your experiences are waves. Joy rises, fear rises, relationships rise, identities form, plans appear, grief arrives. Everything takes temporary form. Yet beneath these temporary forms is a deeper continuity. You are not only the wave, you are connected to the ocean. And when you remember this, change does not stop hurting, but it stops threatening your deepest identity. You may lose a role without losing your being. Someone may leave without taking your source with them. A chapter may end without ending the life within you. This is why connecting with Source changes relationships so profoundly. You stop asking another person to become your spiritual oxygen. You begin meeting them as another expression of life. You can say, "I love you," without secretly meaning, "Please prove that I matter." You can say goodbye without believing love was wasted. You can allow someone freedom without making their freedom a rejection of you. You can let love become presence rather than possession. Two people do not have to become missing halves searching for completion. They can meet as two whole expressions of the same source, both learning, both growing, both remembering. And when love comes from this place, it becomes lighter, not less meaningful, more honest. You are no longer loving merely because you are afraid to lose. You are loving because love is how you want to participate in life. That is a very different intention. It also transforms prayer. Prayer may begin as, "Please make this happen. Please make them return. Please remove the uncertainty. Please fix everything that frightens me." There is nothing wrong with bringing your desires to prayer, but prayer can deepen. Instead of only asking, "Change this," you begin asking, "Help me see this clearly." Instead of "Make them love me," it becomes, "Help me remain loving without abandoning myself." Instead of "Remove every uncertainty," it becomes, "Help me trust while I do not know." Instead of "Save me from life," it becomes, "Help me meet life consciously." Prayer becomes less about controlling the universe and more about aligning yourself with the source. And there is a quiet relief in this because you stop imagining God as a distant power waiting for you to become worthy enough to receive peace. The source is not somewhere in the future. It is not waiting beyond the next achievement. It is not hidden behind another person's approval. It is here, in this breath, in this moment, in the awareness that notices your fear without becoming fear, in the love that remains possible even after disappointment, in the silence beneath the mind's constant commentary. You do not have to chase the source. You become still enough to recognize that you never left it. This realization changes gratitude too. Gratitude no longer means pretending everything is wonderful. It does not mean denying grief or putting a positive slogan over pain. Real gratitude is quieter. It simply notices what is present. The breath entering your body, another morning, the people who have loved you well, the lessons you received from those who could not, the meal in front of you, a few moments of sunlight, the fact that after everything you have experienced, you are still capable of love. The ego continually says, something is missing. Gratitude whispers, something is already here. And what you place your attention on shapes the inner atmosphere in which you live. You can spend an entire day thinking about the message that did not arrive and fail to notice the people who did show up. You can spend years grieving the love one person could not give and overlook the many forms in which life continued loving you. Gratitude does not ask you to forget what is absent. It reminds you not to become blind to presence. Life is happening now, not after the apology, not after the relationship appears, not after you have healed perfectly, not after all your uncertainty disappears. Now, you are breathing now. You can choose kindness now. You can return to awareness now. You can begin offering yourself the love you kept postponing until someone else arrived. And this is where the teaching becomes practical, because spiritual truth matters most when the phone does not ring, when someone does not answer, when a plan changes, when the old insecurity returns at 2 a.m, when comparison suddenly tells you everyone else is ahead, when loneliness arrives, when you feel the urge to chase, explain, control, prove, or beg for reassurance. In those moments, ask one simple question. Where have I placed my peace? Have you placed it inside someone's reply? Inside somebody's mood? Inside the future? Inside the hope that a person will finally see you correctly? Once you notice where your peace has gone, gently bring it home. You do not have to become indifferent. You can care without clinging. You can hope without demanding. You can love without handing over the entire responsibility for your inner state. Each morning, before immediately reaching toward the world, spend a few minutes remembering yourself. You do not need a complicated ritual. Sit, breathe, listen. Notice that you exist before anyone asks anything from you. For a few moments, do not solve your life. Do not rehearse yesterday. Do not predict tomorrow. Allow yourself to simply be. There is something deeply healing about meeting yourself before meeting the world. As you become more familiar with this stillness, you may begin recognizing two voices. Fear is usually urgent. It says, do something immediately. Fix this. Make sure they still care. Find out what happens next. The deeper voice rarely shouts. It may simply say, wait, be still. This is not yours to carry. Tell the truth. Let this go. Trust. You do not have to force that voice to appear. You only need to create enough silence for it to be heard. Then during the day, practice remembering. If someone praises you, enjoy the praise without allowing it to become the source of your worth. If someone criticizes you, listen for anything useful without handing them authority over your identity. If someone chooses you, receive the love. If someone walks away, grieve honestly. But do not walk away from yourself because they did. That may become one of the most important promises of your life. I will not abandon myself. You will not always keep the promise perfectly. There will be days when old patterns return. There will be moments when fear becomes louder than awareness. Healing does not mean reaching a permanent state in which nothing triggers you. Healing means becoming increasingly capable of returning. You notice sooner. You breathe sooner. You forgive sooner. You stop building a permanent identity around a temporary emotion. A wave rises and falls. Your emotions will do the same. One morning you may feel peaceful, and by afternoon, an old wound can suddenly become active. The spiritual path is not asking you to freeze the surface of the ocean. It is asking you to remember its depth. You can feel sadness without becoming only sadness. You can experience fear without constructing a home inside fear. You can feel loneliness without deciding you are unloved. Feelings are real, but they are visitors. Awareness is the space in which they arrive. From this awareness, forgiveness becomes an everyday practice. Sometimes forgiveness is releasing a wound from 20 years ago. Sometimes it is refusing to carry a 5-minute irritation into the rest of your day. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Someone speaks impatiently. A friend forgets something. You react badly and later realize you could have responded differently. In every case, the invitation is similar. How long do you want to keep this inside you? The ego loves collecting evidence. Remember what they did. Remember what she said. Remember how unfair this was. It believes remembering anger will keep you safe. But there is a difference between remembering wisdom and rehearsing pain. You can keep the lesson without continuing the suffering. This is maturity. You can say, I will not allow that again, without saying, I must hate this person forever. You can create a boundary and remain peaceful. You can learn and still let go. And gradually, uncertainty begins to change its meaning. You stop demanding guarantees from life. You begin trusting your ability to meet life. Instead of constantly asking, what if everything goes wrong, another question becomes possible. What if I am capable of meeting whatever comes? This is not blind optimism. It is spiritual confidence, not confidence that nothing difficult will happen. Confidence that difficulty cannot separate you from the deepest source of who you are. Winter does not mean the tree has been abandoned. The empty field is not forgotten. A sunset is not a failure because daylight ended. Nature is constantly letting go, resting, transforming, and beginning again. Your life has seasons too. Some seasons are for building. Some are for releasing. Some bring companionship. Some bring solitude. Some provide answers. Others teach you how to live peacefully with questions. Do not condemn the season you are in because another season looks more beautiful. Meet this one. There may be something here that cannot be learned anywhere else. Eventually, inner freedom begins to look very ordinary. You stop chasing people who continually show you that they do not wish to stay. You stop endlessly explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop interpreting every ending as evidence of personal failure. You stop asking your heart to become somebody else's responsibility. You learn to rest when tired. You listen when something within you says no. You give yourself time when healing does not happen according to your preferred schedule. You stop requiring perfection before offering yourself compassion. This is what choosing yourself can look like. It is not dramatic self-sufficiency. You do not become invulnerable. You do not announce that you need nobody. You simply become willing to remain present with yourself. And when you remain present with yourself, you discover that you are also becoming more available to the source. Because beneath the fear, the performance, the approval seeking, and the constant effort to earn love, there is something very simple. You are here, you are alive, you are aware. Love is still available. Maybe you have spent many years waiting for someone to arrive and tell you that you are enough. Maybe you have waited to be chosen before choosing your own peace. Maybe you have waited for someone to apologize before releasing the past. Maybe you have waited for the world to become certain before allowing yourself to trust. You do not have to condemn yourself for any of this. You are seeking what every human being seeks: safety, love, belonging, peace. But now you are beginning to see that these qualities cannot remain permanently dependent on another person's behavior. Something within you is remembering where they come from. The peace you were looking for was never hidden inside somebody else's approval. The love you were searching for was never supposed to depend entirely on another person's presence. The source you imagined was far away has been quietly present beneath the noise all along, beneath the fear, beneath the resentment, beneath the waiting for you not to become someone new, but to remember who you were before the world convinced you that you were incomplete. So carry one question with you, not as another assignment, as a gentle reminder. Am I waiting for someone else to give me what I can begin opening to within myself? When you notice that the answer is yes, do not judge yourself. Return. Return to breath. Return to awareness. Return to love. Return to forgiveness. Return to the source. And if this reflection has brought someone or something to mind, you may choose to name quietly what you are ready to stop waiting for. You do not have to make a dramatic promise. Sometimes simply seeing the truth clearly begins the release. And if these kinds of reflections help you return to that deeper place within yourself, you can continue walking this path whenever you need the reminder. But before you move on to whatever comes next in your day, stay here for one more moment. Nothing needs to be solved right now. You do not need to chase anyone. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to earn your worth before the next breath arrives. You do not need to know who will stay, what tomorrow will bring, or how every chapter will end. Just recognize what is here beneath all the noise: a quiet awareness, a living presence, a connection that rejection cannot erase. The source has not been withholding itself from you. Love has not disappeared from existence because one person could not give it to you in the form you wanted. Your life has not forgotten you because one chapter ended differently from what you imagined. You are still part of something larger. You still belong to life. And the moment you stop asking another person to complete you, you become free to meet them from a deeper kind of love. The moment you stop demanding that the world rescue you, you begin discovering the strength that was hidden beneath your waiting. The moment you stop searching everywhere else for the doorway home, you may finally notice where it has always been. Not within the frightened personality that tries to control everything, within the quiet awareness beneath it, within the presence that knows how to breathe through uncertainty, within the part of you that can love without possessing, forgive without forgetting wisdom, and trust without requiring guarantees. You may have thought you were waiting to be saved. Maybe you were really waiting to remember. And now that you remember, even for this single moment, you can begin walking home.